Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday and welcome into Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. Hashtag no stopping you. I hope everyone is off to a nice start, loving this beautiful weather. I was working the Royals game last night, and as I've said, we're working road games at home. It was actually cooler up in Chicago. That makes sense. But it was like driving around on a golf cart to go from our booth to our left field set. And you close your eyes. First off, nobody's out there right now. That's still strange to me. But I mean, it felt like a early October night. I don't. It's just the strangest thing in late July and now early August to have this weather. We'll take it as long as we can get it. Just happy that baseball is back on the field, and that'll be a bit of the discussion today. Do want to thank my friends at KCAV, the Kansas City audio visual experts, and the KCAV studios here. They have set me up with a great home studio that I've been able to use for baseball too. I've interviewed some of our players from the road right from here out of my house. I think we all know how that world works, and they can take care of all of your needs. So I hope you'll check them out at kcav.com. I mentioned that we're going to talk some baseball today, and we'll talk baseball, but more than that, community and what a baseball team and an organization can do in bringing people together, and the charitable aspect of it. The Royals are so generous. I'm not just saying that because I work around them. I get to see it every single day. It was something that the Glass family believed in incredibly. I think it's something that the Sherman family and their ownership group believes in, and my guest right now can certainly talk about that and the pivots that so many of us have had to make in the world of business or everyday life has been the same as well for the Royals. And I'm happy to visit with a guy that I hope he doesn't get nervous being on TV because he's never done that before. Former Fox 4 anchor, oh my gosh. And now long time, I say long time, I think it's been like since '06 or so. Oh, '05. Oh, Toby, you're muted. See, we already messed this up. Oh, I did it. It's my fault. Who's directing this show?
They miss me saying 14 years this week. August the 1st, I've been with the Royals for 14 years, which is the longest I've done anything in my life.
Well, I'm at 12 years, and that's the longest I've ever been anywhere. Because we are in a business that just has a lot of movement. That's true in the sports world. That's true in the TV world. I told you before you came on that I'm now the director, the producer, and apparently the sound guy too, that muted you for my open and then forgot to unmute you. So I'm embarrassed by that because, you're a TV guy. But Toby, for those that don't know, used to be an anchor on Fox 4 here in town, but he's been a vice president with the Royals, as he mentioned, and with the Royals since '06. I believe the title is vice president of publicity, but when you start talking about so much of what the Royals do in the community and Royals Charities, you and your staff are hard at work. And I wanted to have you on because, like everybody else, your world and your department's world has changed so much, but yet I know that the need to be out there still exists.
Yeah, and we've been very fortunate. These poor salespeople who are selling tickets and the vendors who are trying to sell beer and hot dogs in the ballpark, they've been affected a lot more than we have. We've been able to continue to do our jobs primarily because our communication has turned all online and digital. Now, we're still face-to-face with our communication eventually, but when we tell somebody what's going on around the Kansas City Royals, we start off by putting it in a press release and send it out to the media, and they either will or won't mention it. But then we've got this fantastic social media department at the Royals. I think it's one of the best in all of baseball. And that was an unsolicited comment that my 22-year-old son made to me a couple of days ago. He said, "Dad, who's running your Twitter?" And of course, the first thing you think of when somebody asks you that is like, "Why? What happened?" He said, "It's great." I mean, he was not, there was no pretense to it because things were being posted during the game that were smart and they were fresh and they were timely and they spoke to a young man, which is really good for our baseball game because, Lord knows the average age of a baseball fan is closer to you and me, Joel, than it had been, than what the baseball people would like. We need younger fans, but we've been able to communicate that. The other great thing is that, the late, great David Glass, whom we honored this past Friday night with our home opener, He was all about community and charity, and John Sherman and his investors didn't miss a beat. He loved it. Everyone feels like they know a man who is philanthropic, and he's doing it for the right reasons. And it was pretty seamless, this transition of continuing to reach out in the community. So we get to do that stuff, but we're also able to communicate it in a way that other people who are relying on human beings to come in contact with them cannot.
It's so interesting to me because, social media, and for good reason sometimes, can get a bad rap because there's so much negative out there, and it's just it can be such a dangerous place mentally to go. It's such an easy spot for people without a name or a face to vent, and I get that aspect of it too. It's sort of like, the grumpy fan, but it can be so mean-spirited. And
Yep.
But yet you're talking about the other side of it and the connectivity and the way it has been able to bring people together, right? And the ability to bring this game and these personalities to people's homes at times where they may not be able to leave those homes.
Yeah, I feel like two of the most important people at the Royals over the past several months have been Miriam Maiden, who's our director of HR, and Aaron Sleddens, whose team runs social media. Miriam was in charge of making people feel it's going to be okay, but we have to really crack down from an associate standpoint coming to the ballpark on seeing what we can do to help slow the spread of this disease. And that's why most of us worked from home for several months, like a lot of people did. And so we were in communication with Miriam, and she was telling people from JJ Piccolo in the baseball ops department right down to an intern who had just been hired a month and a half before COVID hit and then had to go home for a while and didn't have the arrangement that they thought they were going to. And then Aaron's team, everything that the Royals were communicating was going through their group, from Twitter and Instagram and Facebook to YouTube, and the way that you're communicating now when we haven't had baseball games and now have baseball games. And it was a godsend for us to be able to keep that communication going. And I think that it was important to the fans, because that we were so close to starting the season. Those poor guys were out in Arizona, and all of a sudden they were told to go home, and we don't know when you're going to be playing. And then 2 weeks later, Salvador Perez I think we called it the Salvi Splash in one way or the other, but he was washing his hands and singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." Hilarious, but he did it for 20 seconds because you're supposed to wash your hands for 20 seconds in order to help contain the spread of the disease. And it was viral, and people loved it. And I think that served a really, really good purpose to, if your Major League Baseball team is in it with you through all of that, it's going to help. And so I'm grateful that we at least had the opportunity to do that.
My mind just went somewhere, and I want to go here. There are a lot of places that I want to visit with you during this interview, but you're more of an old school guy like me, right? I mean, we watched a different generation of the game, and I started thinking about the new rule that has so many old schoolers upset about the 10th inning. I happen to like it because I think it adds an element of fun, and it's unlike anything that we saw growing up. And I think that's okay. Things don't have to be the way they were when we grew up. We're not getting that back. Everything evolves. The reason why I bring that up is, you mentioned your 20-year-old, and really that's got to be the target audience. My 17-year-old, he loves baseball. He's probably going to watch, but a lot of his friends may not watch every single day. We can't be the boring game that Grandpa used to watch. You know that, and I know that. I know John Sherman understands that, and so many people do. So change happens. And I remember a conversation that I had with someone on my crew years ago, in my early years here, someone that we know, and I won't mention the name, that said, stop messing around with Twitter. People aren't going to do two things at once while they watch a game. Unfortunately or fortunately, this generation that's coming up can do 5 things at once. Doesn't matter whether you like it or not. So I think there's an opportunity here right now, Toby, to pull back that curtain when people don't have access, and to actually give them something where they feel like maybe they're getting a little bit more. I don't know how you see that.
And what was it about NASCAR years ago that they talked about those drivers connecting with the fans? It was because the fans really felt like they knew the drivers. I've been asked before, how in the world are you going to get the median age fan of baseball down? And I thought social media has helped some, and this was a few years ago, because the guys were tweeting on their own. I mean, when we do community and charity initiatives, we have so much better a time with them when we're doing things that they care about, when it's a part of their personality. Mm-hmm. Alex Gordon has been a mainstay. He's probably kind of an old school guy like you and I, younger than we are, but he does things a very traditional baseball realm. But the one thing we latched onto with Alex Gordon was he cared a lot about people recovering from and fighting cancer. His mom had cancer. He cared about kids with cancer and worked with Alex's lemonade stand. And it made our effort to the community so much better than us going to them and saying, hey, we've got this thing, and would you come and spend 1 hour there? Or we've got this group at batting practice. Would you come and say hello to them? And they always said yes. They were very good about it. But when the guys would come to us and say, you know what, I really care about this because my dad was in the armed forces and I want to help out with military families, that was a big deal. Well, coupled with the fact that they now are all have their own social media accounts and they're active in it, our folks over on the social media side said that just made their lives so much better. It didn't make it, they got busier because they had to, it felt like they were managing 2 or 3 or 4 people in their department and then 25 guys on the field and keeping an eye on what they were posting. But it created a window for the fans to see these guys' real personalities, and it made them care about them. And sure enough, after a few years, I sit there and I watch those silly broadcasts, and I didn't think I would ever do it, but I run through Twitter and see what people are saying. I mean, I'm even doing it now because I learned from, other people saying that that's what was going to happen. So yeah, I was the same way. I hated the instant replay when it came in. I love it when it goes for us. I still hate it when it goes against us. I still look to see if a guy is batting 300 and if a starting pitcher has a certain number of wins, because my brain is in the 70s and 80s when it comes to the statistics. But man, I'm really enjoying sort of a youthful exuberance feel to the Royals that wasn't there years ago.
Well, it's just different, and I saw Goose Gossage going off the other day in I think an article at the New York Post or something. But he's as old school as they get, and he's not going to change. But change is important, and I see right now that even the guys that we have coming up right now, they to me make an Eric Hosmer look old. Because he's 30 and these kids are, Brady Singer starts today and it's his 24th birthday. I mean, these kids are like a generation behind in terms of they know no other way than social media. And look, I mean, Alex Gordon is still young, right? In baseball terms, he's older than us, but he's, I think, 36 years old. You won't see him on social media. I think that the greater point is that he'll do anything you guys ask, that he's there right. Like that. When Alex Gordon does it, everybody else is going to follow. But I wonder what you've seen in terms of the younger guys coming up and just how they're different than players when they were coming up when you were 2006, because I think there is a generational difference here.
Yeah, we in 2018, we had several of the former Royals out to celebrate our 50th season in baseball. The numbers don't match up, but 1969 to 2018 was our 50th season. And so we had some of the great Royals of all times. We invited a lot of names that you would know. And one of them was Buddy Biancalana, who was hilariously a star of the 1985 postseason. David Letterman had him on. They showed slow motion of him walking several times and getting on base. And he was a good-looking guy and a very popular Royals player and has been in and around the business for many years. And I was in the press box with Buddy Biancalana, a kid that I watched during that 1985 World Series run when I was a senior in high school in a small town in Kansas. And I'd gotten to know Buddy a little bit, and he, without, like my son saying about our social media department, he said, these kids, and he was pointing down at the young players, and he said, this is a good good group of kids that are coming up. And I think that you may have picked up on that as well, that the older you get, the more you think that the younger generation people are going to be, well, they're not doing it right, and they're going to ruin the world. And they've got poise and they've got respect. And this is a good group of players that we have coming. And I've noticed that about it. You know, the aloof ball player, the guy who isn't particularly warm with the fans, I really feel like it's kind of going by the wayside. You'll still have some of those guys, and some of them maybe even feel like they have to hold that persona because if they give to everybody, you know, not everybody can be a Reggie Sanders or a Mike Sweeney where they're going to be all over you. And they're reserved. Some of them, it's because they're shy, and the only where they feel really comfortable is out on a baseball field, and they don't like all of the attention. But many of these guys are very, very respectful, and they get it. They get the dynamics of the baseball game as it pertains to the fans and the fans wanting to know them. And the other thing I was thinking was that, you know, when Bubic pitched the other night, how he seemed to be the most exciting player on the field right now, only because – you know, we've created this situation with the Royals trying to get back to where they were in 2014 and 15, where it is the younger player that people are more excited about. That's not the way that it was for a long, long time. And I think that's good for baseball.
Yeah, and it's just, I agree that across the board, there are probably just more good guys or less aloof people in the game. But I also, and you know this, so I'm preaching to the choir, that's a culture aspect that was created by Dayton Moore. And so, you know, it's nice that there's this synergy that didn't miss a beat going from one owner to the next, right? I mean, if Mr. Glass had sold the team to a guy, say on the coast, that didn't have ties to Kansas City, and that was a possibility. Well, it might not have been a possibility, but it could have happened if he wanted to let it happen.
Yep.
We might not have had this identity. We might not have had this, but we had a guy that came in here that already knew Dayton Moore, that already had an idea and shared similar values. From what I can tell, you're a little bit closer to it, a lot closer to it than I am. But Dayton Moore has made it a point. For instance, when I got here in 2008, there wasn't the same type of character as there was now. We have more Mike Sweeneys and Reggie Sanders, you referenced those two guys, than we ever did back then. I would argue that we have a team full of Mike Sweeneys and Reggie Sanders. Maybe not to the level of personality of those two guys. They're on the extreme of, you know, who's going to win the nicest guy of the year award, and those two and Raul Ibanez are going to be up there among some others, right? But you have, and I know that for your department, when you're relying on these players to be out in the community, involved in charities and helping connect people, you got a lot of guys that are going to say yes, and it's got to make your job so much easier. I know it makes my job easier, and I know it makes a lot of people happy at home. They really, to me, represent what our community is about, and I think everyone should be proud of that.
I do too. You know, when I came in 2006, I discovered very quickly that having a Major League Baseball team in town was still a big deal. The team had not won for a long time. But people wanted to be excited about the Royals. They had that one winning season in 2003, but other than that had just really struggled. And yet when we went to a Special Olympics clinic and you had two ball players that nobody really knew, it was still a huge deal to those parents and, of course, the athletes. And we tried to celebrate that. And thankfully, you know, we had a Mike Sweeney and a Reggie Sanders there around that time, but other guys. And at some point, as you said, there was a transition period where they were not only nice enough to say yes. So you got the yes and you've got them there, but they also deliver once they're there. Now, I believe that if a guy's going to be shy and if he's not going to be terribly warm and fuzzy to people, there's still going to be an appreciation that, wow, I have a Major League Baseball player standing on the field next to my son or my daughter. But when they're engaging, when they ask their name, when they actually seem like they care about being there, that's a grand slam. And I think we had those things over and over and over and over. And then let's not forget that it really helps that these guys got more talented, or we started drafting guys that were very, very good at baseball. And the combo of, I really care about this person and I want to see him succeed, and wow, that's the best bullpen I've seen on the Royals ever. It all came together, and it was very, very special.
It was 14 and 15 were special, and I still think we're feeling that now, just in terms of the pride for this team. By the way, while you were talking before, and I was a little late on the draw, but I just wanted to pop that up there. So there you go.
There he is.
Biancalana on David Letterman. So I just, it's the beauty of technology nowadays. I want to shift gears because we're getting used to, we don't like it, nobody does, we're getting used to no fans in the stands, yet we have these cardboard cutouts, which, I think could have been really, I think it could have been really cheesy, but it's not. It was so well done. And I don't know, I haven't inspected it enough in other places if it's just as good in other spots. It feels like we hit something here that made not every one of the fans. I mean, some of the fans, the cardboard cutouts are just everyday fans that, that are people in the community. But a lot of them are local celebrities, and they all represent Kansas City so well. And so I think there's a cool feeling when you look in and you see some of those people behind the scenes. As a matter of fact, Kiana Sinks, she writes in, "Thank you for placing Buck in his seat. I've never met you, but I love you." Buck O'Neil brings that feeling out in everyone. To me, that was a no-brainer. Put Buck O'Neil in his seat. But you see Bob Kendrick. You see Kathy Nelson. Everybody keeps asking, who's that sitting next to Bob? Oh, that's Kathy Nelson from the Kansas City Sports Commission. She's got a front row seat every single day. Tell me about the process of coming up with this, because you guys really paid attention to a lot of detail and made this feel so Kansas City.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And you're right. The Kansas City feel to it in the Crown Club, for better or for worse, was wonderful. I didn't know how I felt about Buck being in his Buck seat, because we have people in the Buck O'Neil legacy seat who are unsung heroes, people that you wouldn't know, ordinary people who've done extraordinary things. And I can give you the number now. 1,069 people have sat in the Buck seat since we started that in 2007, but we had to put him in the seat. I mean, there's a cutout of Buck O'Neil. Which seat should we do? Okay, how about the red one right behind where he used to sit? And that was special. The mayor is there next to Kathy Nelson. Mm-hmm. The Jackson County executive is there, who happened to be an 8-time Gold Glover, Frank White, and all of those former players. And that's why we put the recognizable faces behind home plate, because that's the majority of the game. That's where people are going to see it. It came about because there was a rumbling around Major League Baseball about doing this based on a few organizations that had done it in the run-up. I don't know who came up with the idea. I think that we might have executed it better than anybody. But as an example, he's not living in Marysville anymore, which is north of Topeka. He's now in Topeka now, but I have a friend who is a Catholic priest who had a small parish, and he got this from a pastor in another denomination, the idea, and this was swirling around the internet, where he asked his parishioners to take pictures of themselves, and he was going to put them on the pews. Now, this is one example of what happened in the 3 months leading up to it. He and like 2 other people in the church are the only ones that are doing this streamed mass, or where he got the idea was from this church somewhere in the United States. And the only people that were in the church at the time were the people that were doing the streaming, but he put all these pictures up on all of these chairs, and it felt like his congregation was there. And I had heard our marketing department say, well, you know what they're talking about? There's 2 or 3 other teams that are talking about doing this in the stands. They're called cutouts, and they're not cardboard. They're hard plastic cutouts, and we're thinking about doing it. I thought it was a great idea. And we decided that we were going to ask our season ticket members to submit photos of themselves. And the photos had to look sort of like you and I sitting here, where it was our head and our shoulder, a head and shoulder shot, as we say in the business, a mug shot. And we got all sorts of photos that we couldn't use. People were sitting back and they were turned this way, and we couldn't hardly see their face. And of course they had a beer in their hand right here, and which is fine. But we tried to explain to them exactly how to submit it, and the vast majority of them submitted perfectly, and we gave it to season ticket members. Now, we knew that we only had a small amount of time to do this, because you will have to remember that we found out when our first home game was going to be only 2 or 3 weeks before. Mm-hmm. And so we said first 500. Well, we blew through that 500 and we said, okay, we'll do 250 more. We did 750, and then all of these celebrities that are behind home plate. And I think that the marketing department just did a really nice job of, all right, who are some personalities around town that people are going to be interested in? We had a cutoff. We sold all of those season ticket members for $40, the cutouts. We didn't make a dime off of it. Half the money went to pay for it, and the other half went to Royals Charities for our COVID relief. And then we had some of those celebrities. And I will admit this, because it was flying around social media this weekend. The Marlins man contacted us, and I think that I don't know if the deadline had passed or if we were about 40 minutes before the deadline, but he said, I'll give you $1,000 for Royals Charities if you throw me behind there. And we said, take his money. And we did, and Marlins man is in the Crown Club. So it was really a lot of fun.
You know, I've never spoken publicly about Marlins man.
I haven't either, so here we go.
And here's the reason why. Everyone that raves about the guy talks about the money that he gives. So how do you rip a guy that's constantly donating to good causes? But I find him so damn distracting every time he's behind home plate, in part because he's always so distracted. And I thought, okay, if he's got a cardboard cutout, he probably spent a lot of money, which is awesome for Royals Charities and ultimately what it's about. But couldn't he have at least submitted a picture where he's on his phone?
Yeah. Because unlike the in the flesh Marlins man, this Marlins man just sits there. So maybe he's a little less distracting.
Or maybe like have other cardboard cutouts inexplicably approach him looking to take a picture with him.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I understood why people want to go and take selfies with him, but he seems to thrive on that. I've never met the guy. I don't feel a need to meet the guy or interview the guy. I don't really understand ever why he gets the attention he does. But I know he does a lot of good, and my friends in the media locally tell me that. So, you know what? That's important, because you know that as well as anybody that there are a lot of people that need help, and you're involved in so many of those causes. And look, when you get that money, it helps. So just wanted to throw a little bit of shade, have a little bit of fun with that one. But I'm not the first one to say he should have been on his phone, because it would look more appropriate. I actually wondered if he would have a cardboard cutout in all 30 stadiums, because he does seem to appear in every place.
Yeah, he might have created several himself and is just waiting for entree into other ballparks. I don't know.
Anyway, Marlins man, kudos for donating $1,000. I got to throw this one in there because every chance we get to mention the hometown of Independence, Kansas, right? Not the same as Independence, Missouri. Totally
Correct.
Different. Not saying better or worse, but when I think of Toby Cook, I think of Independence, Kansas, even though I've never known you as anything but a guy here in Kansas City.
Thank you.
This is another good question from Kiana, and she's just asking about, and she's got a great relationship with Bob Kendrick, about having access to this museum. I know there's no guest that we have on more regularly on our pregame show than Bob Kendrick. Who wouldn't? I'd take him every single game if I could with that storytelling. But what does it mean to the Royals to have that synergy with the museum, which just continues to grow?
It's the best. When Dayton Moore insisted on having part of, and not that he wanted it a part of his legacy, but if he was going to have a legacy in town, it was going to be this, creating an urban youth academy in Kansas City in the urban core so that kids of all different backgrounds could play baseball and softball. He wanted it down at the 18th and Vine District, and he wanted it within walking distance of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. I'm not ashamed to say that I love Bob Kendrick. I love him as a man. I love him as a baseball person. I love him as a leader in Kansas City. He gets a lot of love from a lot of people, but Bob and I have known each other for many years. He used to bring Buck O'Neill into the Fox 4 morning show for his 90th birthday and 91st and 92nd. And he would bring in these big cakes. And, you know, if there was anybody that was going to be an ambassador on behalf of baseball, not just the Negro Leagues, but baseball in general, it was going to be Bob. And it's been great because each one of the young people who experiences the Urban Youth Academy can also experience the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum if they haven't. And I always think about Futures Day in Kansas City that we held each year. The baseball ops department does, where they bring up the minor league pitcher and player of the year award winners, generally the last home weekend of the season. And we go to two places. We go to the children's floor at University of Kansas Hospital, and we go to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And then we feed them at Jack Stack Barbecue. And so they're very, very happy with that morning. But Bob gives them the rock and roll tour of that museum, and he's a Kansas City treasure. Who would have thought that we would have two Kansas City treasures coming out of that same movement? But Buck was the first, and Bob is the second. And it's so important for us to take the lead. You know, one of the goals for Bob was to have the entire league embrace the Negro Leagues Museum and not just Kansas City, just because it happened to be here. And so we've done our best, but when he can get the New York Yankees and the San Diego Padres and the St. Louis Cardinals to also do things, and especially with the centennial year, it's wholly appropriate. And I'll throw in this, coming from Independence, Kansas, late 70s, I told Bob this. When I was a kid coming up to Royals games, I remember I could count it up. I could give you, I don't know if it was 77, 78. 7 of the 9 starters on the Royals roster were black. Mm-hmm. We had 7 of the 9 players were African-American and a couple of white players. And you go around the diamond from John Mayberry to Frank White to UL Washington to Willie Wilson to Amos Otis to Al Cowens. And now there are very, very few. And we would love to get back to where baseball is much more diverse. And certainly these last couple of months in Kansas City have given us all something to think about and to talk about. But I can't put a description about how important it is, our relationship with them.
There's no question. And I know it's something that we're all proud of I think we're all proud just to call Bob a friend. And then anyone that goes to the museum suddenly feels the same way. And so that's just, we're lucky to have the access. The reality of it is any team in baseball can have that access right now, especially with the way that we're Zooming. Actually, you've got me thinking right now that with the team struggling a little bit on the field, as we say, and you dealt with a lot of this type of content when you were in morning news, sometimes you need a little bit of offense. And so what do? You say, how about some storytelling from Bob Kendrick? Yeah. So we may be going that route at some point, because really on a good day, bad day, whatever it is, you can never go wrong. And I've said this many times before. I could hear the darn cool Papa Bell story turning out the lights 1,000 times, and I still sit there in amazement and laughing on the 1,000th time. I mean, it's just, it's the best. I do want to get back to those cardboard cutouts, because you guys had to move quickly on this one. I know that this was a big win for the marketing department. It's more than just that, though. I know that there's so many people involved, but how the meetings that you guys must have been in leading up to opening day, and there are always a lot of meetings, right? I mean, This is a huge production to get things going. How different was it this year going through something that was so different?
Because we were doing it just like this. We were doing it on Zoom. We have a technology that we use called 8x8, which is another video conferencing system. And we were doing it all by that and or the phone. And you had to visualize in your mind's eye, okay, how is this going to work? And how are we going to pull it off? Well, the first thing you do is you think about the camera angles, because this is a made for TV sport if it's ever been, because that's how people are getting it now, or listening to the radio. But primarily with TV, left-handed batter up there over his shoulder on first base, right-handed batter, third base. The shot from center field right behind home plate. We had to think about placement first. Then we realized, well, we don't have an army of people to install these. We're going to pull these out of a box, and they're quite thin, and they stack on top of each other, and they're held down by zip ties, and they fit right into the seat. How are we going to do this? Well, most of this pandemic, our sales staff has spent working from home. They're they had a little rotation for a while. Then we had a flare up in Kansas and Missouri. We sent them all home and said, just keep working from home for a while. The one time where most everybody was in the stadium was the installation day of the Fambassadors cutouts. And we had all the salespeople come out, and they had a manifest, and they knew where the seats were assigned to each individual name, and they just started installing them, and we spent the day doing that. So you can do a lot leading up to it, but in the end, we had to have people come together and do the work of putting them in and then zip tying them to the seats.
It's just all been different. But I smile every time I look over, and then we show those shots a lot coming back from commercials, and I'm like,
yeah,
hey, I work for that guy. There's Patrick Mahomes. That's at least been my joke. And go back over to the other side now and throw touchdown passes. But it's just, I think it's really brought people together. So final couple things as we wrap it up. I know that Royals Charities will never stop. I don't even want to say it'll ever slow down. It's, again, like anything else in life. We've all had to figure out new norms. I mean, Toby, I'm getting my information for in-game reports without being face-to-face. I can't be face-to-face with the player. I'm not sure how many fans or people watching right now know that I don't, and I don't think you have the access to even go into the clubhouse. And we could have done that at specific points of a day. It doesn't matter that you've got a VP title in front of your name. You can't get down there right now. That's all for the protection of trying to keep this game going, and they're being tested every day or every other day. We're not. So I know from my end, I have to figure out still a way to tell these stories. And let's be honest, Salvador Perez doesn't want me texting him and calling him every single day. So I have to figure out little new ways to pick spots. Talked to Ryan O'Hearn for 5 minutes on the phone the other day as he was walking out to the field at Wrigley to get some work and get some stories in. And then, hey, let's make sure I don't bug him again today and the next day and the next day.
Yeah.
Where can I do the? So we're all trying to figure that out. What are the challenges going forward right now? Because it looks like you guys have adapted and adjusted beautifully to events that you in the past did in person, and now you're figuring out new ways.
Yeah, I think that the big things ahead are Royals Fan Fest, which happens in January, and that is a large group of people all in one place, and no decision has been made on Royals Fan Fest. I asked recently, and they said we'll be announcing that in probably the off season, so that's going to be a bit of a challenge. Will we be able to do what we've done every year and did this past year, which is to get a bunch of things signed by the players? It's called the MLB authentication process, and we have bats and balls and hats and everything down at Arizona where we have them sign in one day that we use for the majority of the season. I think that that's going to be something that we're going to have to address. We can look back, though, and know that we did some really good things in the very first couple of weeks of the pandemic. Ownership came together, the investors came together, Alex Gordon and other players came together and donated money, and we were able to donate 500,000 meals, 500,000 meals to harvesters. We held a produce distribution with the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department at the Urban Youth Academy, and this was right in the middle of all of the protests that were going on across the country. So that was an interesting time to do that. We had a blood drive. I think that we just have to keep doing things that we can do where we are able to be socially distant with a mask on until we can have people in the stands. And knowing what our track record has been over the past 3 months, I have no doubt we'll keep doing it.
Well, and I think the greater message here, Toby, this doesn't need to be political. This doesn't need to be, I believe, I don't believe, I'm doing this, I don't do this. Like, let's put all of that aside. Okay, I'm not saying you can't take a side. I have my side. I happen to believe in science, but put all of that aside for a moment and say, we can't stand still, right? I mean, there are, the one that always stands out to me, because, we have you on our pregame show every year multiple times, and, the broadcast auction is always a highlight. Mm-hmm. Actually, I kick back that night and I let you be me, and I just kick back, and then I get to announce what some of those, I get to interview you afterwards and say, how much money did we raise? And it's always so gratifying to see the work and be such a small part of it. But there are so many people that need the help of Royals Charities, and the one that always stands out to me, and I know there are many, was when the tornado hit in Joplin. And I remember being, I think, on the road and getting a message, hey, we're jumping in right here. And it was like, this is why you guys do what you do.
Yeah.
Because you get hit up by requests from a million charities, and I think almost all of them are good in some form or another. Most of them are great. But it's those events where communities have been decimated where you're able to jump up. That's never going to go away. You guys have to figure out a way every single day to still exist, right?
I agree. And, was a little hesitant or shy. The Greensburg tornado happened right after I came on board, a small town in Kansas west of Wichita, and it just wiped out the city. The Joplin tornado, which was personal to me because I worked in the Pittsburgh, Kansas, Joplin, Missouri market. So I was in all of those areas as a reporter. And we set up on the south side of town in an area that had not been hit as badly as others. And we partnered up with a local group that was cooking hot dogs, and they were buying shoes and socks and underwear and other clothing from a local Walmart. And we were in the parking lot there, and we thought, what are we doing? How are we going to help? And then we had Willie Akins and Brian McRae with us and a bunch of Slugger and the K Crew. And you wouldn't believe the people that came up, and just for a moment of time, they were able to not think about the fact that that their lives had been turned upside down, and they started talking about the Royals in the 70s and the Royals in the 80s with those two guys. And Slugger was jacking around with fans and doing funny stuff, and that's where a Major League Baseball team can do so much good. Not only the physical stuff and providing money and resources, but also lifting their spirits and thinking about how they feel when they watch a game on TV or come to the K. So that's the important stuff that we do. You're right.
Well, keep it going, and I know you will. You, all of your staff, I know the passion, and even at times from a distance right now. By the way, I saw 3 animals, because, we're doing these games without any fans. So in the last week and a half, I've seen 3 animals roaming around Kauffman Stadium.
Oh, yeah.
I saw a wildcat. Not a wildcat. That's somewhat normal. I saw a raccoon in the Diamond Club when the team was gone. And I saw a lion on a scooter.
The first two people might be surprised to know we see a lot when the team goes out of town. We're in a wooded area, and there are some animals that make their way into the stadium, and then we have to get them out before the team comes back. The lion just keeps showing up.
I'm getting a kick out of the fact that he's like spinning around in circles on a scooter or whatever he rides around on, and there's no one there, just like players on the field. And I'm in the middle of doing an update out on our set. I'm like, there goes Slugger. And he's not really waving to anyone. He's got to go do something, right? And he'll show up on camera, obviously. But I never really had thought about how wooded of an area it was, because I'd never been in the stadium when it was like pitch black and like last night. The only ones that were there were us broadcasting the game at Wrigley Field. So just truly unique times. But I'm glad you had some time to come on, Toby. I think this is important. And Royals.com, everybody can find out all that information and find ways to get involved, right? Oh,
you bet. And Royals Charities is also on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and you can follow along with our social channels. We'll be doing something every day, either talking about something we've done or doing something in the future.
I'll throw a couple of these out there before we get out. I like to sometimes get to the comments, but I like Cass Butler, who was a guest, phenomenal panel on racial injustice last Friday, saying an exciting time for sure. Twitter definitely enhances the experience. So again, kudos to Erin Sledens and her team. Mike Meyer, who I believe is going to be a guest later this week. Meyer Music, class act, Toby. Royals are lucky to have you on their team. I agree with that.
Thank you, Mike.
And there was one more I wanted to. I don't know the answer to this. It might be no, but we'll throw it out there to get the information out. Steve asking any chance of extending the cutout program to raise more funds for charity and cover other parts of the ballpark.
Great question, and I've asked the same myself. So we got those 750 plus up for the first homestand, and they're still churning out a couple of more. If there's any chance that we can get them to say yes, then yes, more are coming in before the end of the season. I just don't know yet.
All right. Toby, this was awesome. I appreciate you spending the time. You're a good man, a good friend. Keep up the great work, and I will see you at the ballpark. I mean, I think I'll see you at some point, right?
I'll pop around, and I'll see you on TV, Joel, every night.
Sorry. But hey, every night that you see me on TV means we still have baseball, and that's a
We're
good
still
thing.
playing baseball, which is good.
All right. Thanks, Toby. Have a great
Thank,
day, and
thank you,
hopefully we'll
buddy.
see you win the night in Chicago.
You bet.
All right. Royals Vice President of Publicity, Toby Cook, who has been at this TV thing and now baseball thing for a long time. He and I are old guys in the worlds that we live in, but we certainly love doing that. That's going to do it for another episode of Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. Thank you all so much for watching, for sending messages in, for continuing to participate. 97 episodes in. Never thought that would be the case. It's been a lot of fun bringing this to you now from the KCAV Studios, Kansas City Audio Visual. They'll take care of those small needs and big company needs, so check them out at kcav.com. And I could not do this without my partners at Enterprise Bank and Trust. #NoStoppingYou. Have a great Tuesday, and hope to see you back here tomorrow, everyone.